Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's late night panel. Gene Roddenberry, visionary futurist or guy with a good idea. I'm James Brophy. I'm a Star Trek fan since Next Generation, but I'm really enjoying Lower Decks at the moment, which has just finished its first season. And I'd like to ask my fellow panelists to introduce themselves and please tell us what their first and what their favorite corner of Star Trek is. Valerie, let's start with you.
Okay, so I started watching Star Trek back in the beginning, and it's been a lifelong love for me. And I would say my favorite corner of Star Trek, I can't pick. Deep Space Nine. I'm going to go with Deep Space Nine.
And here I would have thought you said fan fiction.
I was going to say fan fiction, but I figured let's just start with Deep Space Nine, which I hold dear to my heart, and the fan fiction, which can come from Deep Space Nine.
Excellent. Russell, how about yourself?
Sorry, which bit first? Yes, hi, my name's Russell. I mostly describe myself as more of a casual Star Trek viewer, but I have seen a fair few bits and pieces, even if not entirely in Strange Orders. I really like the film. I really like a lot of the films. I was a big fan of Picard the season. Obviously, Wrath of Khan, because and the third in the latest films is Beyond, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. That was totally me.
Justin Lin can direct the hell out of a movie.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Helen? Do tell us all the history.
I think the World Plus One knows that I met my wife at Star Trek convention back in 1980. We didn't get engaged for a while until after that. Actually, I got into Star Trek, would you believe, when ITV was having a strike, and we were all watching the BBC. This was back in the late 79, 80. And we were all watching BBC because it was the only channel available to us back in the time before we had, Netflix and all the other channels. And so I got into Star Trek at that time. So obviously I started off with the original series, the reruns, got to a Star Trek convention, met up with people, joined Star Trek Action Group and all that kind of thing. And so I've been watching it through the years. I'm just saying to other people that there are some of the new series that never caught on with me. I didn't watch much of Enterprise. I couldn't tell you one episode from another. I did watch Discovery, and I did love Picard. So it'll be interesting to see what else they come up with. I do love all the films in all the generations of films.
So Gene Roddenberry was known for invention both on and off screen. With the new generations of Star Trek series, Discovery, Picard, and Lower Decks, we're seeing fans re-examine his legacy and in places going so far as to separate it from him. Given its 50-year span, how integral to Star Trek can any one person be?
Who you want to start with?
Oh, sorry. Let's start with Livia.
Okay, Gene Roddenberry. I think he was a guy with a good idea who wanted to make some money and basically created something that almost immediately grew beyond him. And I don't know if he was so much of a visionary as the people who grabbed onto his idea and fell in love with it were visionaries themselves. So I'm going to fall into the guy with the good idea who got lucky. And I think we need to separate the art from the artist.
So which collaborators would you pick out then? Like Gene Alcoon, who had worked with him before that on The Lieutenant?
I can't even. I would say that would be a good place to start. And I think that definitely Gene Alcoon is not given enough credit for his contributions to the larger.
My favorite story in that direction is standing on Gene's desk, so that because all the cast were waiting to rehearse,
Yeah.
and he would stand on his desk with one leg either side of a typewriter until Gene finished the damn pages.
Yeah.
So how important can one person be? Helen, how about yourself?
In a way, I think Valerie's right insofar as he was thinking about Star Trek as a product. He had to pitch it, but in a way, he was visionary and he stuck to his guns on a lot of things. When they did the original pilot, they had number one and they had the Vulcan, and they were told when they went for the second pilot, you have to drop them. But he fought for the vision that we would have aliens in the future and the aliens would have to be French. So he had to fight off. Unfortunately, dropped number one, but he still built up strong female characters in the series anyway. In the later ones, Next Gen, we know was his. I'm not sure what he would think about some of the other spin-offs. DS9 is probably again very close to his original vision, but not so sure about the rest.
That's one of the more interesting things about the current discourse of Star Trek is that people see Next Generation, they see Deep Space Nine doing all these things that the writing rules of Next Generation wouldn't allow. Or at least people think of them as not allowing, but they are allowing it because humans aren't having fights with each other because most of the cast is aliens. There's 3 humans on the show and they're all the guys. Everyone else is an alien on the show. And that allows you to adhere to Gene's rules. How about yourself, Russell? As a casual viewer, how much would you pick out, or would you even know to pick out Gene Roddenberry from the general milieu of Star Trek?
Yeah, I'd be quite limited on that. But what I would certainly say is you cannot have you cannot, as a general rule, have a series that spans this many decades and this many iterations without having had or without something having gone very, very right for you in the first place. So I mean, there's a bunch of elements here. I mean, you know, whatever he came up with, he certainly had the brakes about him that it kept going. Huge credit you've got it. I mean, huge credit with the original series. You've got to obviously got to give on the now fairly legendary story of Lucille Ball having had her intervention there
Indeed, without I Love Lucy, there is no Star Trek. There is no Mission Impossible.
Right. So
Paramount is gone under without Lucille Ball.
So you know, it's just there's always a lot of little there's always a lot of little things along the way with these things, but you know, somebody had to put at the same time somebody had to put it on the table in the first place, and yeah, as far as a legacy surviving, I mean, you know, try not to be an awful person, or you know, your fandom will try doubly hard to separate to ensure they are separated from the original artist. But yeah, this but yeah, in terms of being in the right place at the right time with some things. I tell you what, I would love to see. I'd love to see a film along this line. It's the same, similar to when we there was a going somewhat off topic here, but the film about Marsden and the influence on his Wonder Woman. Yeah. So I'd love to see a similar biopic on Roddenberry and see where that took us.
It is often so difficult to separate the truth from the truth from fiction when it comes to something like Star Trek, because the myths around it support it in such a strong way, and in some ways the myths are integral to it. Like the idea that the fans are the ones who brought it back, which I know many fans who hold that to be an absolute truth, that the fans were the ones that brought it back. And TV executives, people who work in TV, would hold that that is less than true. And the fan component was not the deciding factor. It was about how popular it had become in reruns, and therefore was testing well in multiple markets. Livia, as a fan from the original series, where do you sit on that? Do you believe that the cult of Star Trek was the important factor in bringing it back?
No, I don't. I think that a couple of things were that there was a few things happened at the same time. Star Wars came out, Battlestar Galactica came out, and then all of a sudden there was this hunger from the fan base for more Star Trek. And I think what it came down to was it's CBS that owns Star Trek, that they basically, they wanted a dog in that race. So I think it was a money decision. I would like to believe that fans can influence people, but at the end of the day, I think it's the guy who adds up the numbers and sees how much money can be made. I mean, look what's happened on like the Sci-Fi Network. They've had a lot of really great shows, but in the end they found reality TV made them more money. So it doesn't matter how many fans wanted Warehouse 13 back. It all comes down to where's
Is it
the
easier
money?
to make Storage Wars than it is to make a new scripted series?
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, I dare say, given the state of America, its experimentation with reality TV has definitely gone as far as it can possibly go. So maybe we'll see less of it in the future, and it'll hopefully be referred to by some detail-heavy crew member in a future Star Trek show as that brief period where humanity almost brought itself to the brink of destruction by flirting with reality television. So there is an interesting thing about Star Trek's return, that there were two competing properties at the same time. So who can speak about Star Trek Phase 2 versus Star Trek the Motion Picture? Who knows about Phase 2?
Yeah, at Phase 2, wasn't that where they were? I can't remember. They were going to bring in a new Vulcan character because Leonard Nimoy didn't want to participate in Phase 2 for various and sundry reasons, and I don't know exactly why. But they were going to bring in another guy. It was Voss or Voss.
Yes.
Voss, was it? Is it Voss?
The name ends up being used in the motion picture as the Vulcan science officer who is almost immediately mangled by a transporter.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I know that they had the two competing property, and they ended up going with Star Trek the Motion Picture instead of Phase 2. But that's all I know about it.
And even when it was Star Trek the Motion Picture, the two scripts that were on the table were essentially, one was what ended up being made, which is essentially a rewrite of the Enterprise encounters a probe that's discovered sentience, and my personal favorite, I think it's called The God Thing, was the original title, which is which was Gene's script for. Do you want to Helen? Do you want to try and put words on what it was?
No, I was thinking The God Thing was basically who made us and finding out that a probe goes out and has been given sentience and now wants to come back to God. In other words, what we saw coming back. But I mean, I think we got another iteration of that in Star Trek 5, but that's another matter.
The theory was that Gene's idea was that that at one point you would have the literal Jesus Christ on the bridge of the Enterprise.
Okay.
I didn't read that bit. No.
Yeah, which maybe apocryphal. I don't know. I have trouble separating the myth from reality, which is partly why I'm doing this panel.
It's a very different show at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say. Sorry, Kent. I would say
that like something more Battlestar Galactica, maybe.
Well, even then, Battlestar Galactica would couch it in metaphor.
Yeah.
Helen, you were about to say.
Well, as far as I know, Gene Roddenberry was atheist, so I think him playing with that would have been playing it with kind of in a satirical form or in a what is this nonsense form. I don't know whether that did the same thing, but he was visionary in many ways, and but I don't think he was visionary in the religious way. from what I know.
But
How important was you mentioned his lack of belief there? He himself identified as humanist. How important was that to the Star Trek philosophy as a whole, or did that gain importance over time? Because there's a chapel in the wedding ceremony that's supposed to be happening in the original series, and by the time you get to the Next Generation, it tends to look a lot more like a series of non-denominational hotel rooms and crew bars throughout the Enterprise.
I know which one you mean about the chapel, but I don't really see. I didn't see that as a chapel, as more of a reflective area. A lot of well, I work in a hospital. We do have a chapel, but we do also have a separate meditation room. So I think I would tend it towards a meditation room, a place where someone can go and get a bit of quiet and peace and think about things, which you never know. They could have had that carrying on. I'm thinking of a parallel in the dreaded opponent to DS9, which was Babylon 5, and they did have a lot of religious characters in that from different worlds and different species. But
and entertainingly, most were monotheistic, except for the humans, who had I think it was something like 40-something representatives on board of various faiths.
Yeah. But anyway, they did touch on religion in so many different ways, but the religion never really came off very well for those who believed in it.
I was gonna just jump in real quick. It seemed
Please.
as if whenever religion became involved, that there was always sort of a negative veil over it. Like if you look at like the Bajorans, they were very religious people, but that religiosity sort of was at the heart of a lot of their conflicts.
That's interesting that you say that, because the Bajorans were definitely one of the more positive representations of religion in the show.
Yeah.
As it was said at multiple points, their faith got them through things. I for one found to inject myself into the discussion, I found it really important that Star Trek Next Generation anyway presented a faithless society, a society that didn't actually have faith as a cornerstone, because when you grow up in a strongly religious environment and you are not shown any alternative, but you have the thoughts for wanting an alternative in your head, it's extremely useful to have something like Star Trek to like disappear off to, and just think about contrast. So, well, if I didn't have to navigate around this thing, what would my life be like? And that's a strongly useful thing in a show that is objectively quite silly at times. As much as I love Star Trek, I do also acknowledge it's very silly.
It is very silly. Yes, it's very silly.
Yeah. But that's part of what we want. That's fine.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah. I think I'd argue that's one of the things that's one of the strengths with Picard, because it goes from that it goes from that faithlessness, and I suppose just raises a few questions in the current times of of various things, and just alters our I don't know, makes us think about our approach to how we've seen things so far, and how they've evolved over time, and it's
so when Gene was when the movies had started and he'd lost control of them, the opportunity to make Next Generation came about, and I think it's safe to say that his vision of Star Trek had shifted somewhat. So why is the Next Generation a cashless atheist utopia, where one of the phrases in the original series is that you'd often hear Kirk say is that you've earned your pay for the week, mister. Why is the petty infighting within crew members dialed down to almost nothing? And if Gene had his way, like absolutely nothing, where the only people with personality conflicts could actually be aliens on the show. At least that's how it was intended.
Difficult, because I just feel that. Sorry, Russell, you go ahead if you want.
I was just very shortly. I almost wanted to say because the 90s, but you know.
Yeah, personally, I think that it almost got too homogenized in Next Generation until slightly later on, where you did start to see personalities coming out, but yet there was never. You should have some negative interactions in human society, but on a professional level, they should still act as one. Something it should never interfere with the running of the ship or the diplomacy, etc. But the fact that you never had anybody acting out was it just with you saying that, yes, it just struck you as kind of a little bit jarring.
Okay, I'm just going to say so the Next Generation, dear to my heart, but the first two seasons where Gene Roddenberry really was still, he still held the reins. A lot of it's really kind of unwatchable. And I wonder if it wasn't in syndication, would it have survived those first couple of seasons? And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know, after season 2, was Gene Roddenberry still at the helm?
He was receiving tapes more than he was anything else. The Next Generation was an interesting kind of construction because people would submit things and Gene would go, "That's great," and take them on board. And so largely, those are materials from David Gemmell and Dorothy Fontana, and the weirdness starts once you actually get into once you actually get into assembling a writer's room, because the first two seasons of that show had a revolving door writer's room. A huge number of people, frankly, an unmemorable number, a list of people you couldn't keep in your head, and I've tried, worked on that show in the first two seasons. The head writer, I think was this one of the senior producers, came up with a set of rules for what Gene wouldn't reject. And if you met that Gene wouldn't reject these rules, then you got to be on the show. And one of those rules was humans can't have fights. If someone has a personality defect, they must be an alien. Which is Michael Piller, who went on to become senior producer and head writer of the show and went on to co-create Deep Space Nine, had a speech from a scientist about baseball, about how whenever he did a good job, he'd sit back and he'd think about baseball games and he'd play those games in his mind. And once he heard the rule about aliens being the only ones who can have personality problems, then he realized that, yep, I'm losing the baseball speech. But it was so good, they actually kept it in, and they let the human scientist be capricious and an idiot, and almost kill a computer-born silicon species, because speech was that good. So as much as people think the rules were completely infirm, if you had a really good script, you were allowed to break the rules. His life at Paramount before Next Generation got greenlit was also quite interesting, because he was writing back and forth to fans largely, and so I think that elevated a lot of what he himself thought about Star Trek. Now, as he approached the end of his life, there was a battle happening for what he saw as the soul of Star Trek. When for instance, he called Star Trek V, directed by William Shatner, apocryphal. Even though Star Trek V was largely based on his own rejected script for the first Star Trek movie. He bitterly disagreed with some of the choices made by Nicholas Meyer for Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and as they didn't conform to that utopian post-racial idea of what Star Trek is, and there's some, like, if you watch the unedited scenes of some of Star Trek 6, some very uncomfortable scenes in the filming of that film. The Now, of course, he didn't see the release of the film because he died shortly before.
Yeah.
Now, does Star Trek still adhere? Does the Star Trek universe still adhere to Gene Roddenberry's vision, or would shows like Picard or Discovery or Lower Decks happen if he was still holding the reins?
I think they would, just because letting it evolve was part of what he seemed to be okay with letting it evolve, but was he actually okay? I didn't realize there was a list of Gene rules for scripts that went to him. So
it wasn't that he created these rules, which was the interesting thing. It was the rules for what Gene wouldn't reject. That I think was Morris Binder who created this.
I think one of the great things about Star Trek, now whether this was Gene Roddenberry or it was just everyone that fell in love with it and sort of took it over, the fact that it evolves is what makes it so great. And the fact that not only does it evolve in such a way that, you know, you can create your own characters, you can write your own fan fiction, but there's room to have things like Lower Deck and Picard, which Lower Decks is fabulous, by the way. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I haven't got to that yet, but I've heard really good things about it. So it's definitely on my list. If it wasn't allowed to evolve, I don't think it would have survived. Simple as, because, you know, what was even with the original series, what was groundbreaking then. You look at a little while later, and you sort of think, well, okay. I mean, you know, the bits that would clearly be problematic in a modern eye, and I mean, you can say that even. You can say that obviously about the Next Generation as well. So it's just constantly. It's because it's constantly moving. It's tries to. I think it always works at the time, but I think we've always got to keep a reviewing eye on it.
Some would say the progressiveness fell behind somewhat because as one of the senior producers of Deep Space Nine said in the What You Leave Behind documentary, he wouldn't grade himself as having done well by LGBT representation in the show, because in the way Andrew Robertson tells it, in the first 2 seasons, Garak's gay, and Garak has a real sweet tooth for Dr. Bashir. And in season 3, the studio told him back off that. And so they backed off that for a while, and then they put it back on, and then they backed off it again. And some would say Riker is the best beard in Star Trek, but I still say Ziyal is the winner. I love late night panels because I could not make that joke during the day. Yes, the not making Garak gay, having what some at the time saw as a cop out by having Dax's lesbian kiss on the show actually be because they were in a married heterosexual relationship in a previous life. Some saw that as a cop out to that. But others saw it as still valuable that something as big as Star Trek still had 2 women kissing because they had romantic feelings for each other.
Well, there was a big fuss about the interracial kiss with Uhura back at the time, which was certainly the first. As they said, it was the first on US TV. But there was a show on the UK that was ahead of it. It was one of the hospital dramas somewhere. So I can't remember the exact name now. But again, this is not. I mean, it's really not something I'd say we'd see as groundbreaking now. Yet there was that. Yet there has been even even till fairly recently, there was a fairly lengthy Hollywood stigma on that happening. There would always, when there was a relationship that could potentially happen, interracial, they would steer around it somewhere. It'd be a friendship or whatever.
We have got to the point where baiting an audience is actively part of a media campaign. So what was risque with Garrick and Bashir is absolutely encouraged in non-canon fandom now, which is somewhat disappointing, because just put the relationships on screen. We're all big enough to accept it, guys. And to a certain degree, like, you're very late turning up if you're still getting round to certain kinds of representation. With Discovery, for instance, the Doctor and the engineer character, it's just like, oh, well, good for them. Is anyone offended by this? No?
No.
All right, cool.
I think it's interesting that finally, okay, so Janeway and 7 of 9.
Mhm.
Here's another one where I think that they were originally planning to have the 2 women in a relationship, but then they backed off of it. But if you watch Picard now, it's 7 of 9 is obviously interested in the character whose name I can't remember, but there's a lot out there about Janeway and 7 of 9. Now, is this just fandom? Was there something to it? I seem to recall reading something where they originally, the writers wanted to create a relationship between the 2, but were told to back off from it.
Well, in front of the camera, I think the decision was made to replace Kess with a more dangerous character. He was very, very close to Garrett Wang being dismissed from the show instead. But he got people's sexiest. He's like number 19 on Sexiest Man of the Year somehow, and he got to keep his place on the show. And Kate Mulgrew has admitted in multiple interviews that she was less than kind to Jerry Ryan when she came to the show.
Yeah. That's come out a lot.
For less than kind, read really terrible work practice. So I think like the idea of them having any kind of romantic relationship on screen seems less than likely to me, because I don't think they play that.
Yeah, and yet I'd hear about certain directors who would absolutely do it just because they knew the tension was there.
That is a factor, yes. I've got a question here. T-Ferg, UK. Will Star Trek ever have an 18-rated movie like Deadpool, for instance?
No, I can't see that happening. I think the Star Trek ethos, whereas I don't think the powers that be would let that happen. They know where Star Trek is as a niche product. And yes, they have made certain sectors of it more adult.
It's a lot of swearing.
Aggressive. Yeah. But I mean, I think people don't like swearing. Some people don't. Some people don't care. But I can't see them actually going X-rated. No way.
I think Discovery is about as far as they're going to go.
Discovery does have some interesting corners to it where you actually do see people having sex on screen, which is
people drinking.
Certainly first for Star Trek.
I suppose the counter question is what benefit would the franchise get from it? I mean, do they? Again, I suppose this would come down to executives, wouldn't it? But I mean, really, is there that much of a demand for? Or I don't know, dirty Star Trek or whatever we call it at that point.
I feel the debate would start and end with the first two movies in the reboot universe, where to be a female character on screen, you have to. Apologies to those who I've said this to 100 times, but to be a female character on screen, either J.J. Abrams films, you have to either give birth to one of the male leads on screen, or you have to strip down to your bra. if you have a speaking role in either of those movies, you have done one of those two things, which does seem less than progressive. And Mr. Abrams has apologized for both.
Well, I think he apologized for the scene in Into Darkness.
Yes.
Yeah. So with the female scientist.
In fairness, it wasn't any more germane to the plot in the first one.
Yeah, he's kind of, mind you, in saying that, they cropped out the scene of Benedict Cumberbatch in the shower, which was not fun for me. I wouldn't have minded that being in. So if they put that in as well as the Carol scene, fair enough.
I'm just going to say something real quick about Gene Roddenberry, just, to make sure that we give him credit for being as progressive as he was. Later in life, he gave an interview where, he talked about the relationship between Kirk and Spock and how, in some ways in his mind, their relationship was closer than just friends. And don't forget Uhura and Nurse Chapel in, I forget which episode, What Little Girls Are Made Of, or something. They had an interracial lesbian kiss. Am I remembering this wrong?
It's not in my memory banks.
Maybe somebody remembers this. There was something between them.
If anybody's out there, can you tell us the episode?
Yeah.
Chat, we are calling on you now.
Yeah, I'm like not remember. Maybe I'm remembering some fan fiction I read or something.
Someone knows. They always
because
do.
There's a lot of that out there.
So, actually, to take it back to Gene for the moment, I personally have a favorite story about him that actually has nothing to do with Star Trek. Do you of those that I'm not going to ask you, Russell. You're let off the hook. Of those that have been Trek fans to the point where you've seen Gene represented as a strong figure in history. What are your favorite tales about him, whether they're true or not? Like, do you have a favorite anecdote you can think of?
Ooh. Not so much of him. I do remember that the Irish TV presenter Jerry Ryan was a massive fan. And I remember that when Gene died, I got a phone call from his radio show because Jerry knew I was a Star Trek fan. I ended up going into an office, ducking out of work, going into an office and doing an interview about him on radio on the day he died.
Oh, wow.
With Jerry Ryan on RTE radio. So
hang on, Jerry Ryan, not to be confused with Jerry Ryan, is that correct?
No, Jerry Ryan,
Brilliant.
not to be confused. Jerry Ryan, I did specifically said the Irish TV and radio presenter.
Google Jerry
That's
Ryan radio
right,
presenter, and I guarantee you will not mistake these two for each other.
No, I do
no
remember
disrespect
that.
to Mr. Ryan's memory, of course.
Yeah. There's a lot of personalities, celebrities out there who are great fans of Star Trek and we're very respectful of Gene Roddenberry and so forth. Of course, his ashes went into space with the space shuttle or something like that.
It's quite interesting that there's very few creators who actually have that kind of gathering around them. Like the other obvious one is George Lucas, but that he unfortunately lived long enough to see the double-edged sword of that reputation once he tried to go back and make another movie in a franchise 20 years later, which he has said since he doesn't recommend it to anyone. How about yourself, Livia? Do you have anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I remember I heard once that they'd hired a writer, and it was someone, and I can't remember who, and I'm trying to remember who, but it was someone who loved Star Trek and was very passionate about Star Trek, and he had all of these ideas, and he cornered Gene Roddenberry and was basically fired the same day. just because Gene
For what
couldn't deal with he couldn't deal with it. Gene Roddenberry could not deal with somebody that was that like intensely into Star
Well,
Trek.
I was going to say, how did he corner him? He's just like, shove a
Yeah, he
hand
like
on the wall.
literally
Gene,
had
I've got to
Gene
speak to you,
Roddenberry
man.
cordoned, and he was like, "I want to tell you how much I love." And I think Gene Roddenberry must have thought he was just a crazy person. They were like, "No, he's a writer." And then Gene Roddenberry was like, "Okay, yeah, he is a crazy person." So, and then he got sacked.
There's
Yeah, I mean,
interestingly
that
a
really
long.
doesn't preclude you from being a writer.
Yeah.
Trust me.
There's a lot. Mhm.
I remember one story that Will Wheaton told, and
Yes.
it was when they were doing Next Generation, and Will was character Wesley had just been allowed on the bridge and everything, but they were filming another Star Trek film at the same time. So Will went across to watch some of the filming from his set on Paramount, and he saw William Shatner, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, you should come and be introduced to William Shatner." And Shatner was not appreciative of him. He didn't think a kid should be on the bridge of the Enterprise, and basically was really nasty to Will. So Will was a bit downhearted, went back to the Next Generation set. Word of the altercation got back to Gene Roddenberry, and Gene Roddenberry made William Shatner apologise and shake hands with Will.
Oh, that's lovely.
Because he wanted to defend the kid that he wanted on the Enterprise. He was involved in putting Wesley Crusher on the Enterprise, and he didn't want that poor kid. He was very young, was Will Wheaton at the time, but yeah, Roddenberry made Shatner apologise.
Yeah. Do you know
For their
Will's had
behaviour.
Good for him.
Yeah,
That is so
Will's
charming.
had a pretty hard time, but he's done all right in the end, but he had to fight for it.
Yeah.
Quite true.
I've got great respect for him. He's a great character now as Will Wheaton. And he still loves his character, Wesley. And it's not something that I typically enjoy on a TV series, having the bright young thing.
I was the
being
exact right age to enjoy Wesley as a character, and I enjoyed him completely and didn't see why everyone hated him.
I didn't get it either.
But then again, I was the kid who would talk too much, and everyone would tell shut up, so it just felt real to life. I will never engage in saying 3 words that Mr. Wheaton hates having said to him, even though many fans take delight in it. My own favorite little anecdote is that according to Will Wheaton, the one way to properly get Gene Roddenberry to shout at you, like get him to really lose his rag with you, is if you engage in what's known as the ancient aliens myth. The idea is that that the pyramids, the Colossus roads, the Mayan temples, of which there's like 47 or something like across South America, that none of these things could have been built by humans because those civilizations weren't advanced enough. So therefore, it must have been aliens. Aliens must have done this because that's more reasonable than humans doing this. And of course, this is just
theory.
Yeah. This is there's no other way to slice it. It's a fairly racist first world philosophy that that because our culture couldn't do this, then your culture clearly can't either. And when you say that aliens are responsible for human achievement, that's how you get Gene Roddenberry to really be annoyed at you, to the point of where Will was sitting there watching this, going, do I have to get involved? Because he looks like he's going to tear his lapels off. which is entertaining enough. We have, thankfully, from the chat, Garnet WW in 2266. No star date, really? Thank you. 2266, Naoto Hura kissed Christine Chapel goodbye on the cheek upon departure for EXO 3 in TOS episode What Are Little Girls Made Of. You are indeed correct.
See? I knew it. See, I've got these episodes memorized. Like the first 20 seconds of an episode, I know right away which one it is. And it's sad, but it's true. But, you know.
As we're coming to an end, one thing I would love to recommend to everybody is to look up the oatmeal.com has a comic called It's Going to Be Okay.
Oh, yes.
Which I heartily recommend, because it's not a story about Star Trek, but it is a story about Gene Roddenberry. And I do think it speaks to, if not the result, it definitely speaks to the intention of what Star Trek could be.
It's a few years old now, but
Yeah.
it's like the perfect thing for this year.
Yeah, I'll be putting it into the Discord discussion group after the panel. So do we have any other? Oh yes. So Gene Thompson has asked, are panelists looking forward to the Pike series? What would you like to see them do with that series? Now, for those who don't know, this is spinning out of season 2 of Discovery. We're going to get Captain Pike on the Enterprise with number 1, and who is still unnamed, number 1 and Spock.
Una. Her name is Una.
Her name's Una.
Her name is Una.
Which sounds very much like one, doesn't it?
You're saying it in a much more interesting way than we do, because Una is a name that you'd hear in Dublin, and we don't say it. We don't put that kind of air on it.
Maybe I'm just so excited that Rebecca Romaine is going to be Una, and then there's like young Spock. And I watched the Star Trek shorts, so if you haven't had a chance to watch those, watch those. And I'm just going to say there's a little chemistry going on there between number 1 and young Spock. So I'm super excited to answer your question. If you can't tell, I'm like literally jumping up and down here.
It is great casting, and they do seem to know how to write Pike very well. Given that episode that dealt with religion early in season 2 of Discovery, I thought was very well measured. I don't always enjoy Discovery, but I think they really know to write Pike well.
They really do, and they've got the right guy to play Pike.
Mm.
He's very good.
Yeah.
And I was he saying that about the Pike series? I actually do remember now seeing the 3 actors doing a little video going, "Yay, we can announce it!" And it just looks very exciting. And I'm looking forward to it as well.
Right guy to play about 90% of things on as well. I know.
Yes,
I get time to live and work watching all these things.
And I forget, Rebecca Romaine's husband plays the first officer on Lower Decks.
Jerry O'Connell, yes.
There you go, Jerry O'Connell. So they're both first officers. So who's the better first officer, Jerry O'Connell or Rebecca Romaine? I don't know. They're going to have to figure that one out at home.
My heart's always going to be with number 1, because I personally subscribe to the Morgan Primus theory that Peter David put forward in the novels, that every single character that was played by Michelle Barrett Roddenberry is actually one character.
My God!
Which is just it's mind-blowingly fun.
Mind-blowing, isn't it? But it's such a fun idea, isn't it? I think
I strongly recommend the New Frontier novels by Peter David if you want to learn more about about the insane theory that frankly is.
The novels are so good. People should read the novels more often. I think they're great.
Of course, we have to give a shout out to Dan Dane, who was going to be on the panel, but unfortunately had to cancel because of good news.
Hi, Joanne, miss you.
Thank you all very much for coming along and discussing Gene Roddenberry's life and works. Of course, we can't hit everything. We can't touch on everything, and because we're Star Trek fans, we're going to divert off to talk about Star Trek in general. So hopefully we've done him. We've acquitted him well, and hopefully everyone at home watching on Twitch has learned a little in the process. I've been James Brophy. I'd like to thank our panelists for coming along. Our guest of honor, Helen Ryder, Russell A. Smith, Valerie Bronson, who of course publishes as Livia Ellis. I've been James Brophy, and coming up next is on Twitch is Carnality, Consent and Castles, Gender and Sexuality in Gothic Literature. It's an 18+ panel, and yes, it does live up to the title. On Discord, we would vote for Russell. On Discord, we have a fantastically entertaining comedy talk called The Turkey Buffet, which I'm not sure the title does it justice. I've seen a little bit of it. It's good crack. So make your choices as to what you like to enjoy, and enjoy the rest of your convention. We'll see you at the Discord bar.
Say it, James.
Night, James.
Thank you.
Thanks.